But let's see if I can remember how to do this by myself. Welcome, everyone. You may have heard I started a Substack this week. I blame all my friends. They've been telling me that all the cool kids hang out on Substack, and I do confess I when I set up the app, I found out I was subscribing to more people than I realized already. So maybe I should have been there all along. But setting up a new internet home, given that I have many mansions and many residences in lots of different places, and thinking about what kind of conversations we are going to be in over the next week, few months, 4 years. I thought it would be fun just to have a sort of at home, ask me some questions, you know, figure out why I, think that I have something to say to the conversation right now. So I'm very happy, old friends, new friends. If you haven't watched one of our streams before, I am usually not by myself. um, Coincidences and the stars aligning made this the best thing to do tonight. So welcome to the Mosaic Arc for Professor Fulton Brown at home. So here I am. Here I am. I the plan was not for me to be by myself this week, but Casey is unfortunately still wrestling with her voice. So here I am. Ask me questions. Okay, so we started a Substack this week, and it was interesting for me setting it up because I have way too many avatars online. And I realized just in the way in which I set up the Substack this time, I said, so I'm Rachel Fulton Brown. You guys do know that. I think I have still managed not to say on the Substack anywhere my name, although there's a link to my academic homepage. I can actually show it to you. I have it queued up here. Here it is, right? So I have links to various parts of my internet residences. The most important one, well, actually, they're all kind of equally important in some ways, sort of a quaternity of places, right? The most important one for our ongoing work as poets is, of course, the Dragon Common Room. And if you're new to Rachel Fulton Brown world, please check out the Dragon Common Room and the work that we've been doing there on our books and so forth. I have plans to tell you about why the Substack is going to help serve that, but I just want to point to here it is, right? If I don't know whether the pointer shows where I'm pointing. Anyway, the Dragon Common Room. The Mosaic Arc page links to the archives on this live stream, and we've been doing it now for 2 years. We've had two of us, several of us doing co-hosting with me. There's 4 of us on the main team who've been on the videos and so forth. This works in tandem with Dragon Common Room to help us unpack stories, right? I'm just telling you that, right? If you want more videos just with me, Bear on Air is the archive that I keep over on my original blogger blog, and that goes back to 2017. I've been here hanging out on the internet for a while. So their videos, those are all linked there, and you can find out many of the other places that I've had conversations with people as Rachel Fulton Brown, right? And then if you really want like the full academic version of Rachel Fulton Brown, go to academic homepage and you can find links to my publications, cross backlinks to all of my public places and so forth, and syllabi for all of my courses, which are also to a certain extent linked on the Dragon Common Room study guides, because there is where we put together a lot of the reading that we've been doing in order to write our poetry, right? Got all that? Okay, it's going to be on the test. You're never going to find it again. It's all there on the Substack. And I realized that when I was putting together the Substack persona, because you realize I live with a lot of different masks. Fencing Bear at Prayer has been my online mask for a very long time now. There have been sometimes, for those of you unauthorized, confusions with whether or not I have a bear name because I am an Owen fan. I am very happy to be here on Unauthorized with Owen in his continuing comedic journey, but I was a bear before he was, or at least before he was visibly online as Big Bear, because Fencing Bear at Prayer, my blog on Blogspot, I started in 2008. So when I became famous for a little blog post that I put up in 2015 about 3 Cheers for White Men, I had been blogging and talking about my spiritual journey for some time. The 3 Cheers for White Men post turned into part 2, I guess, of Fencing Bear's journey, which was much more public, and I'm feeling a bit of like recurrence in all of these activities right now, because of course the major thing that got people's attention on my blog was first the 3 Cheers for White Men blog post from 2015. And then when I became friends with Milo Yiannopoulos in 2016, and that journey is chronicled at length on the blog. We published a book about it. Again, you can find all of these are links. Like you're also, it's like, what am I thinking? Starting yet another adventure online with Substack, when I've been in all of these categories already. We started Mosaic Arc 2 years ago on Unauthorized TV, but I'd already been posting videos on Unauthorized TV for 2 years before that, 3 years before that. When did I'm not quite sure. I did Medieval History series. That was 2019, right? So a while ago. And then Tolkien series 2020, 2021, and then we've been doing the live stream Mosaic Arcs there since 2022. I feel so old. And now you realize why when I sent my first post on the Substack was just, I'm old. We've been doing so many things online with so many hats and avatars. And then of course, once I was following Milo around on the internet because, in conversation with him and wanting to, participate in the parties that he would set up and stuff. And when he got kicked off of Facebook back in 2019, we all moved over to Telegram, which is where the Dragon Common Room started in 2020. I hope you guys are really following all this timeline. It's funny because since 2020, I've been less chronologically adept than I think I was before 2020, because with COVID and everything, never mind what happened over the course of the summer of 2020, already in spring 2020 with COVID and the ring spell of the lockdowns and the loss of time and everything. I blogged about that in May 2020. I am on record as calling it all out as a spell from then, and I did. It's been an adventuresome last 4 years with a variety of things, including having to sue my institution for my religious exemption, because they were really dragging their feet on whether they were going to grant any of us religious exemptions from the vaccine mandates. And when they did that and then mandated that we had to test weekly, I started 2 years ago a prayer group on campus called the Corona Testing Control Group, which met, they're continuing to meet right now. I'm on leave. I end up on leave every 4 years because of a cycle that is accidentally coinciding with our presidential election cycles, but that was just an accident. Or not. Nothing's ever an accident, really, in the long run. Um, we did the Corona Testing Control Group prayer group the first year around the mandates and the concern with the vaccinations, and we did a little conference in May 2023 with a lot of the people that you will be familiar with if you follow that part of our online narrative, who had stood up against the extreme measures and refusals to offer treatment and so forth. And then after we did that conference, the academic I've forgotten what we ended up with more names for subgroups of organizing and such. The same group last year we spent watching the on-campus demonstrations around the October 7th response and the Israeli response to Gaza. So we were there on campus in spring 2024 with the encampments and so forth. We've talked about all of this on the Mosaic Ark. It's been quite a journey. So I sort of setting myself up on Substack was saying, okay, so somehow I'm putting on all of those hats all at the same time. It's like you will know me as Professor Fulton Brown. You will know me as Fencing Bear at Prayer. You will know me as Ancilla Marii, who I am on Telegram. You will know me as the captain of the Mosaic Ark, as here. You will know me as the founder of the Dragon Common Room with our poetry work. And hopefully, we're hoping, and I say we because this is the Dragon Common Room speaking through me at this point, we have volume 2 of Draco Chemicus coming out in the next few months. Our artist is working very, very hard. We have new artist for volume 2 after Act 1 came out last year. I've got it here. Right, here's Act 1, which we also ran a Kickstarter for, so we practiced everything online. We were multimedia version of what it means for people to do different things online. We ran a Kickstarter to help fund the illustration for that act, and we got enough money to help fund us for Act 2 and into Act 3, but it's a 5-act project. So one of the things we're hoping to do is, through conversations with you guys on Substack and obviously with our ongoing conversations with our other internet homes, to raise money to pay our human artists for their work in illustrating our poetry. Right. Okay. So I said I simply that we'd had a plan to do a kind of All Saints meditation on women who have stood up against the feminist narrative. I know many of you on Substack, if you found me through John Carter's conversation, he did a really great hard-hitting piece a bit ago on women in academia. An ongoing interest and obviously concern of mine since I am a woman in academia. And we were going to do a stream tonight on that theme, but Casey lost her voice, so we need a bit more prep because she was putting together a lot of that research for us. Anyway, so now we have questions, and it looks like we've got people in the chat, and I think if you're watching, I've got 3 chats going. You should be able to post into any of them questions. Dragon Common Room is live, and I see some, a smattering of people there. Unauthorized, I know from trying to comment on some other of our new chats that are going in on unauthorized, we still have a bit more of delay. So consider that the unauthorized questions will come at a measured pace, and YouTube will be like that. No. Anyway, I'll say thank you everyone for showing up on YouTube. We got Casey, who is here in spirit, even if not on well, everybody's always here in spirit online. And we could do, got a lot of meditations to do about the new Vatican avatar, the Luce character, Luce light, right? Well, here we are in the light with multiple stories and streams and so forth. But anyway, Casey's here. Hi. Rogue Wave, welcome. Happy All Saints Day. VA Boston, thank you so much for joining us. We've got guest posts coming up from a number of our long-term participants and listeners. VA Boston did a post for us last year. I may have twisted her arm again. A hat for every int branch. Yes. So I did do. I have. I did a little bit of decoration for the at home, right? So I have, the dragon tour that I just gave you, right, which was how do I end up spinning around yet again in another house, right? I guess if I'm going to do the astrological dragon tour, we're going to end up with 12. How many do I have already? I should have counted. Anyway, what's delightful about this dragon is it's a very famous astrological study book that was made for the Emperor Charles V, the Habsburg Emperor, by Peter Appian. And I saw it among other beautiful objects at the Getty in the exhibit that I talked about with Captain Zodiac last week. But I didn't notice this until I was putting together this dragon tour post. The dragon's nose is pointing to my birthday. Or close enough, right? It's like February 12th. There are two of us in the Mosaic Ark that have the same birthday, so I share that with one of our other members. This clearly is an indication that I'm in the right place at the right time to be on tour, joining us in Substack. But there's also the fact that, well, I do need to convince you in this new house to trust me again. And post number 2 in the Substack was a little bit of a CV saying, what are my credentials? I really, really, really wanted to like mark credentials some way graphically, but it seemed too corny. Anyway, you can see how I hope I've proven my credentials of not really being on anybody's side, even though I'm very, very clear about mine with my trees and Christ, our Lord Jesus Christ, and other things. But people too tend to get upset with me, I find, in the internet conversations, because I'm not on the sides that people tend to expect. But I hope you will trust me that I am pretty stable on the ones that I do take, and I've listed references from the blog. The first impost I did was, in fact, before all of the stuff erupted around the 3 Cheers for White Men. So there you go. I was an int before I was an int. But in any case, that is intro. Anyway, here we are back with me just being myself. Okay. So, Casey is asking, I may have primed her. She's a good co-host even when she can't be here. Will you be writing your blog post on Blogger or just on Substack from now on, or both? Okay, so the dirty secret of Fencing Bear at Prayer on Blogger is the most recent post up there is from a year ago when I did a whole series of posts on our Kickstarter, and it's if I do say so myself, an outstanding series, particularly the top 4 they're up right now, which I can show you because I am so clever. I did this. The Draco Chemicus layer 4, I'm going through in those posts the 4 senses of scripture that we're working with. So the literal or historical sense, the allegorical or Christological sense, the moral or tropological sense, and the anagogic or mystical sense that we're using like Dante did in his Divine Comedy. I know it's a little hard to follow. That's why I did all those posts. After we did the Kickstarter that these posts were written in support of, I reorganized a lot on the Dragon Common Room site, which is here. And if you go to Draco Chemicus, whoops, I gotta remember how to interact with these. There we go. If you go to Draco Chemicus, a lot of these posts are now there in links to the backstory. This is the front story, but I also did posts on, let's see, should all be like ridiculously well cross-referenced because I do footnotes. Here we go, behind the scenes. I just forget where I put stuff. Okay, so those 4 posts on the Fencing Bear at Prayer site, um, oh, that's hilarious. I can't remember where I put them. Anyway, they're there. Okay, I'm gonna keep looking because you get the full treat, you get the full service tonight, which is the tour of everything. Here's the frequently asked questions. Ha! That's where I put them. Okay, so I did those 4 senses. I did some other posts on Christian dragons, the on in vintage stories and such. All of that deeper lore is on the Fencing Bear blog. And then, because we really needed to keep in touch with all of you who had subscribed to us through the Kickstarter and were aware of us on the Kickstarter, we started a newsletter, right? And so the newsletter on Dragon Common Room is here. It's all archived. This is, regular updates on things that we're talking about on the Mosaic Arc, things that we're talking about with our friends in the writing world, sometimes footnotes and reading references for some of our Mosaic Arc episodes, guest publications. We take turns as members of the Dragon Common Room writing the different copy. We're going to have for tomorrow's newsletter, so you need to sign up for this because you want it. Casey's done another of her great Halloween poems, so you have to sign up to get on the newsletter for that. And between the blog where I'd written my journey as a fencer and my journey with Milo, and then my journey as the Dragon Common Room, and the newsletter, I between those two, I kind of had put on too many hats, right? There's sorry, I'm gonna interact again. There's like, if you want all the Milo Chronicles on the website, they're here. Okay, so I'm thinking with the Substack that what I want to do is I just sorry, I'm sorry, you guys, if you know me, I do this and it's just me and you're gonna have to enjoy it. I with the Substack, I've just done a golden notebook, and if you know Doris Lessing's Golden Notebook, which was one of my favorite books of all that I read when I was younger, that's what happens in her story, that she starts off with all of these different notebooks, one for her political work, one for her sort of interior autobiographer work. There's the very interesting where she's trying to write what she does every day, right? So it's a kind of diary, but and it ends up, she goes through, I think, 4 of those, but the last one where she's trying to like coordinate all of these different personae that she's put together, she calls the Golden Notebook. Let's hope that the Substack can act in some look, and I even made all of my buttons gold, right? The Substack can work in some fashion as this Golden Notebook to harmonize the different personae that I've been putting together over the years. So it's called Fencing Bear at Prayer. I've got my Academic Hope page linked there. We've got the Dragon Common Room, we've got the Mosaic Arc, we've got all of me as a interviewee. I tend to do interviews a lot about my work on devotion to the Virgin Mary. What I'm hoping with the Substack specifically can do is give you really the deep work that we are doing in writing Draco Alchemicus and putting together all of these themes. But I appreciate from the kinds of questions that we get and the sort of puzzlement that people have and like what is it we're up to. It's like, oh, it's it's cool pictures, but what are you talking about? That I can do posts on the Substack that will help bring you into this nexus that is our thinking on all of these different 4 levels mythologically about Christ. I hope that's all clear. Really, no, if you put me on like slow speed and go through, I realize I think in these links, and one of the things that I want to do with the Substack is give you these links in little chunks, right? Okay, so with the blogger, frankly, I've given myself too many projects right now. The Fencing Bear at Prayer on the Blogspot is going to just stay there as the archive for the moment, and we'll be writing on Substack. We'll be working on our Dragon Common Room poems, and we'll be here on the Mosaic Arc weekly for the near future. Okay, VA Boston, I'd appreciate a repost of the Notre Dame article that was published on the UK Catholic Herald if copyright allows. It's not on the site anymore. I had to look it up at the Wayback Machine. Well, I don't want to leave the Substack site, but it's actually linked on my academic homepage. Um, I can send you, I can take you there. Let me see. So academic homepage. Here I am on my academic homepage. There I am. See, it's the same person. I did have, so in one of in the Substack where in my int post on Substack, one of the references I give you is Bears Two Bodies. And Bears Two Bodies is explaining why my academic homepage has these two registers, right? My professional self and my public self. The academic homepage is hosted at the University of Chicago on one of its servers. And they gave us these. I started the academic homepage in 2002, right? Guys, I'm older on the internet than some of you are. People always ask me, it's like, how long have you been fencing? I'm like, I'm looking at you longer than you've been alive. Okay, so I started fencing in 2003, but the year before that, I put up the academic homepage, and I've kept it current all those years, right? So it's beautifully current. If you want things like, you can go all the way down to my teaching, right? All of these are linked to syllabi. You can see I've tried to brand myself on the Substack with all of these hats, right? So I've also given you the intro page is one of my little Anchorstein buildings. I don't design these. I use their models, but it does take a small amount of skill to put them together. But you can find my courses linked on the academic homepage. The problem that happened back in the day when I first became super famous for writing about Milo, which I have detailed at length, but maybe you guys need the story again, was writing about Milo. We have a Divinity School newsletter that observed the fact that in 2016, 2017, I was writing about Milo. They asked me to do a little post about what was so significant about Milo's tour, particularly after it blew up around Berkeley. I wrote a little piece about that. It came out on a Thursday in February 2017. By the Monday in February 2017, Milo's career was destroyed. I got caught in the middle of all that, including by colleagues who were furious at me for saying that there was a religious significance to what was going on. And one of the things that happened in that moment was they were saying, well, but we don't like that you have on your academic homepage links to your blog. And I said, okay, that's ridiculous. Fencing bear, it's a bear. Here I am myself. No, I wrote Bears Two Bodies as the sort of meditation that Immanuel Kant might enjoy, because in his essay on what is enlightenment, he's going through this problem of having a public self and a private self and which one's which. Okay, mine are distinct, right? Here's my professional self. Here's what I do for the university. This is what, I'm professionally inactive for, and you can listen to what I do, why I do what I do, that I was interviewed for last year and a half ago on that. And then my public self links all of these other places that seem to keep happening to me, right? The blog, the videos, the more blogs, the guest, all of it's linked here. Now, what VA Boston is asking about is a little article I did back when Notre Dame in Paris caught fire. You can see, here's all my articles that I published in academic context on devotion to Mary. There is a space that's called Cultural Commentary, and the one you're asking about, the Catholic Herald one, it's Her Cathedral, but Somehow Our Lady has been forgotten. It's linked there as reposted by another site. So I've tried to keep, this is what's funny about, people, oh, right, and don't trust my Wikipedia page, except for the fact that it links to these pages and is more interested in the fact that I was on the front page of the New York Times than anything else. Okay, fine. I try to have my homepage active with places to find me, the Dragon Common Room active with places to find me. The Substack is going to be primarily for little meditations on imagery, as ints and dragons should suggest. But hopefully you'll be able to find everything linked that way. VA saying a hat for every int branch. Well, that's okay. So that's actually quite, a quite nice kind of thought, right? Because okay, the ints. I say I'm like an int. One, because my name is a story. Rachel Fulton Brown, Francine Barrett Prayer, Ancilla Mariai, captain of the Mosaic Ark and founder of the Dragon Comedy Room. I might as well be Treebeard going harum, 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 which I bet for some of you that's what this is like, right? When is she going to stop naming herself? Um, the ints are, they're trees, right? So that they're all different according to their different tree selves. And every year when I teach the Tolkien course every third year on campus. I've been posting the unauthorized TV videos, the Forge of Tolkien videos, onto the YouTube, so you can follow those now too if you want. But every time I teach the Tolkien course, I have to review my trees again because I'm not a great tree scholar. I like trees, but I don't think I'm truly a tree lover to the degree that Tolkien was. Although I might find out that I am, and I just haven't acknowledged it yet. But for myself, as like Treebeard saying, when the hobbits show up in his forest and say, "What side are you on? What side are you on?" in the Great War, and Treebeard's going, "Okay, nobody's really on my side." That I definitely sympathize with. So maybe I am more of a tree. But of course I'm a woman, so I should be an int wife, not an int. I have a little bit of Joan of Arc character. I'm afraid of taking on the armor and charging into battle. What kind of int I am, I'm not entirely sure. We'll leave that to be explored later. Daydreamer, hail, Professor. Thanks. Okay, Casey says, love all the ancient artwork you put on your Substack, Professor. Well, this is one of the things that you definitely get to look forward to, because I think in images, the best thing that ever happened to me as a teacher, in terms of materials that were suddenly available that I wanted to be able to use was, well, first it started with PowerPoint and then Keynote, which I use now, and I can make Keynote slideshows on my iPad in like that, right? I think in, that's why we called it Mosaic Arc, right? I think in these connections and repertoires and bindings of images, mosaics. The best thing that ever happened to me was the British Library put its images online back in, this was I think I first remember finding bunches and bunches of them for a course I was teaching in war in the Middle Ages. So there's my intness, right? I do march to war for sure. And it's transformed what is possible to talk about in the class, because when I first taught the war in the Middle Ages class, I had to make overhead transparencies of all the maps I wanted to show. The next time around, I was putting up slides of maps and so forth. So yes, the Substack will carry on this tradition because I basically can't think without a picture, and the pictures don't talk for themselves. So I maybe that's why we'll figure out the intness, right? That I talk for the pictures, but I need the pictures to show you what it is that I'm thinking through. We tried having me sing earlier this summer. I'm not going to do that to you now, although I still am proud to be an American. This is the thing about, if you really, really want to understand medieval Christianity, it's this multisensory experience. It's the architecture, it's the music, it's the visual art, it's art in variety of media, right? Sculpture, mosaic, glass, pavements. It's the speaking and the understanding, it's the singing, all of that, right? It's like you want to be in this world of worship and joy. It's going to be all of it. So the pictures are part of it. That's, I think, why we also need to do the live streams, because it needs to be the voice, the human voice. We've talked about that a lot. Although you can't hear me breathing necessarily on the internet, but that matters, right? All of these things come together. Okay, a rogue wave. C.S. Lewis is often described as a modern man with a medieval mind. How does one develop a medieval mind? Oh, what a great question. Well, hang out with us, I hope. So last week, I was talking to Captain Zodiac about the images that we saw at the Getty exhibit, that I saw at the Getty exhibit about light and astronomy and astrology and beauty and so forth. Um, C.S. Lewis was entranced by astronomy. And that, of course, it's the background for what he said in his famous posthumously published notes on basically how to get into the medieval understanding, which was Discarded Image. If you want to like quick, short introduction to a lot of this lore, C.S. Lewis's Discarded Image is a great place to start. I read it in college back in the day. It's a wonderful place to start. And you'll learn there, of course, that he had in his repertoire all of this, both scientific and folklore studies, and those details went into the stories that you all love, right? It's obviously there in his space trilogy, because he writes the space trilogy, the travel to Mars, the travel to Venus, the silent planet that the planets return to. They're planetary image, right? Lewis was Tolkien's idea. Tolkien was primarily interested in history and time and this problem of going back in time through language. Lewis was much more interested in the symbolism that he was working with in those terms. Also, so although they both do allegory, but not at the level that well, okay, well, we maybe should do some episodes on that. You can think about things that you'd really like us to unpack. One of the things that I learned recently in my reading, having gone to the Getty exhibit and looked at all the astrology stuff, is that Chaucer wrote a handbook on the astrolabe. I did not know this. I'm not a Chaucer scholar. I don't know these things. And I'm reading right now the book J.D. North wrote about Chaucer's universe, and realizing, of course, that one of the things Lewis was doing was drawing on his scholarship again, right? The Chaucerian astronomy. We've been in Draco Alchemicus, remind you, Draco Alchemicus, right? We've been in Draco Alchemicus using Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen as a backstory, and one of the things that we're sort of playing with in Draco Alchemicus is likewise, this astrological symbolism, which if you study our pictures, it's all embedded in there. The sort of sense of, oh yeah, there's that one, and then there's a big tell, there's a big giveaway. You realize that image you should now be familiar with from what I showed you last week that I saw at the Getty, right? We saw the manuscript that this is balanced on. It's all astrological. So interestingly, to develop the medieval mind, you need to do several different things. One, think with the arts in harmony, right? In conversation, as I was just saying, it's like the architecture, the music, the visual arts, the intellectual arts, the storytelling, all of that goes into a single thing. And you don't, I mean, it's movies are potentially very medieval because they're sensory in all directions, although they're flat, right? The illusion is on the screen. You have to be embodied, okay, in all of the arts. And you also have to know the sciences, because the medieval art is keyed to explication of the understanding of the creation. And in those terms, they work together, right? The arts and sciences are not separate studies. They're together in I've used up all my metaphors. They come together. I was saying synesthesia, symbolism, all the sins and harmonies and SYN coming together, and that's the medieval mind. Whereas our minds in modernity are fractured and incapable of talking to one side to the other, right? Your left side can't talk to your right side. Your intuition can't talk to your reason and logic anymore. And that developing the medieval mind is developing not this like go back in time and be nostalgic for knights. It's reintegrating our arts and sciences into a full understanding of what it is to be creatures of our creator. Okay. Casey, love that picture of you and Milo Gangstas. Yes, well, that was back in 2017 in the summer. The wasn't the first time I'd met him, but it was the first public time I'd met him, and so we took a picture. Um, I think yes, Rogue Wave. I do think Lewis. It makes sense to talk him a modern man with a medieval mind because I mean, he and Tolkien both worked on this kind of integration in their own storytelling. So, and Lewis. I mean, think about it. This is another way to think about it, right? But we think of them both as authors of books, but Lewis became truly famous because of the radio lectures he gave. The Mere Christianity was given as radio lectures. So he's in that medium. Tolkien was an artist. He's a visual artist. Both of them were poets, and we're going to be talking over the next several year, more than 1 year, about much more about Tolkien's poetry. But Lewis also wrote poems. So both Lewis and Tolkien had this medieval, desire to express the joy of being in, in the creation, and they did it through multiple arts. So I think that makes sense. Um, VA Boston says, "Thank you. I quoted the piece I'm reworking for the newsletter, so I'm trying to get my sources pulled together." Very good. Yes, carry on. Watch the newsletter for a new guest post by VA Boston. The Daydreamer. When is the Shrek episode? That's fair. Fair question. Fair. We need to do the Shrek episode. Casey, you got some homework if you haven't watched Shrek recently, and we gotta there's several movie episodes that we need to do. I just watched the Indiana Jones last one, the time one, Dial of Destiny, and I actually enjoyed it. So all right. So we need to do some more Indiana Jones. We did one on the Ark, but I think there's more to be thought about there. Shrek, I feel like there's some other. Oh, we still need to like revisit the Pirates of the Caribbean, because the more layers of what's going on in the Pirates of the Caribbean lore have become visible. So we really need to work on that. Yes, we need to do a Shrek episode. Okay, pop cultural mosaic. This is VA Boston again. Pirates, ogres, and stories of men seeking learning fatherhood. I think that's what we do. Yes, I mean that's okay. Casey, in the past, you've written about the reflections of the Middle Ages that you see in current trends, events, and public personalities. Do you see yourself writing about that some more on Substack? So what I realize, desperate though we've been on the Mosaic Arc to explain things, the other thing, of course, I recognize in the medieval register is you've got to try all different avenues of communication. That some, it's not just that some people learn by dialectic and some people learn by rhetoric. Everybody learns by rhetoric. Everybody is engaged, by our attention through different things. I highly recommend not only the Getty exhibit, but the catalog for the exhibit. I just finished reading it today. And one of the last essay, Gabriel Starr, by Professor Gabriel Starr, Gabriel Starr, is on cognitive science and vision. And one of the very interesting things she says was about how our minds are designed to help us predict, which I found quite interesting, because we have this predictive problem in Draco Chemicus. You see how it all fits. It all comes, everything, one slender book. It's all in here, right? And one of the things that's I'm trying to practice using a closer focus. So this couple, right? And the man they're both trying to predict the future in a horse race. And so they might be doing that for the election on Tuesday. The man is using Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and the woman is using our sigil, right? And she's sort of doing it symbolically and astrologically and stuff. And both of them want to predict the future. It turns out this was actually exactly the right thing to think about them doing. It's like our minds are designed, according to Starr, to predict, to take in information and then predict, so that we know how to behave in the world. And one of the things that Gabriel Starr suggests with art is it's pleasure in that it sets up expectations, which then we either find fulfilled or disrupted. And there's this sort of this wonderful description of the kind of joy that you have in having to work at unlocking something, but also having, I think the expectations of your anticipation fulfilled. Um, that that's actually pretty hard, right? If you are not familiar with the setup. And on the Mosaic Ark, we've talked some about movies that everybody has seen, but we're trying to get you back into the fullness of the symbolism that we have available in our long tradition, and which I know as a medievalist, most people are not very well attuned to. There's obviously in the scholarship, lots and lots of us. In the Getty exhibit, I spent a lot of time seeing pictures that I'd known for decades because they were things that had been reproduced a lot, and I was like, oh my gosh, I get to see it now. Our scholarship has worked very, very hard to figure out what are we seeing in these images. I mean, even something like our dragon, right? It's like looking at this and seeing it's a zodiac and saying it's a moon and such. The layers of symbolism that you can get in the stories of medieval iconography, they're enormous. It's like it's actually quite fun right now being on the internet in all of the conversations that people are having about what all this symbolism means, right? Jonathan Pajot has his symbolic world. We have the Mosaic Ark. We're here. I know I found already several other accounts on Substack that are interested in this kind of, breaking down the symbolism. My goal is somewhat, is a bit more ambitious, not just that you know what it means, but that you find yourself inside it. It's my Tolkien kind of ambition of finding yourself inside the story, or so you look up in the sky and recognize that Arendelle is the star that you have in your file of Gladriel, right? It's finding yourself in the story. So with the Substack, I'm going to hopefully give this less fire hose effect, and that the post will be meditations on different elements of what we were trying to put into our art. The first one I need to talk about is Maker of Heaven and Earth, and I've got that one already sort of queued up and thought about for our next one. Think of it, the Substack needs to be a kind of encyclopedia of the mythology. That's a good way of putting it. I mean, what I've said on my homepage is it's notes for writing Christian poetry. Come for the stories, stay for the prayers. I looked that up too. That's a 1980s New York tourism campaign, which is probably why it echoes in people's heads. Okay. Robert, I don't remember you ever mentioning how to form the medieval mind. Very interesting. Well, this is why, I mean, maybe we should do more Q&As, right? Because we're always trying to answer the questions that people have, but I need to know what they are, and I'm happy that you guys are asking them. The Daydreamer. Other than Latin, what languages should a person learn for awesome medieval reading? I'm leaning towards Gaelic and Greek. So I know I've read Greek. Byzantine Greek is impossibly difficult. It was very high court culture, literary culture. So it's ambitious. I don't know Gaelic, so I'm not sure. I can read with a dictionary slowly Old English. I love Old English, but I've mainly worked in Latin because most of what I've worked on is the prayer culture, and the prayers are primarily in Latin. But I'm prepping right now for a talk I'm giving later in November, and one of the things I'm showing in the talk is the sort of development in the multiplicity of arts and sciences world of the different vernacular languages. There's Middle High German, and in the Minnesinger poems, there's Italian or the Florentine vernacular in Dante. There's Chaucer with Middle English. The problem with medieval studies is you'll never stop, right? Look at that dragon, right? And I'll point that way. Which way do I point? That way. The dragon there. The glory of studying the Middle Ages is you suddenly find yourself in the world. And I think it's one of the things I started with in my teaching in medieval studies course on medieval travel, and pilgrimage extends into the great expeditions of the Polos in the 13th century, that the medieval world was amazingly interconnected. Another of the things that came out of the Getty Lumen exhibit, was the degree to which this scientific studies, the astrological and astronomy, were in Arabic. In the Arabic work was translations from the Hindu and the Persian. There's Hebrew, the Latin translations. The astrolabe, Chaucer writes his handbook on the astrolabe in English. So pick one and start with it, and then you'll turn into Tolkien and keep going. Hi, Screwed Up Rebellion. Okay, I've got a few here in unauthorized. Hello, Habalo Bear and Annie and Silent Draco. Silent Draco. Observation. Substack may be the least of sites, but a trifle I fancy. Well, I'm getting used to it. I did feel like the first few days I was just banging into walls, finding out exactly which tabs things are stored under and how to set up a publication as opposed to just being an account. It took me a bit. Silent Draco asks, how much harm was done to Christianity by the Reformation? Catastrophic and none, I suppose. That the Reformation rejects pretty much everything that I've given you as the glory of the medieval, and that's very sad. I was listening to Vox, our patron of Unauthorized, talking with James Delingpole, who's also on Substack. But actually Vox is on Sigma Game, right? And James is, and James Delingpole. They were talking about, like, what's the right Christianity, and both of them were agreeing. I was like, I'm not any one that I can recognize. And Vox made the very good point that traditions accrete, right? They build, you build practices, you build traditions. I can't even keep my internet self contained, and how many, it's like, which is the true Rachel Fulton Brown, right? Tolkien had the best description of this. It's like a garden, right? And it should be living and tended, and traditions, if you decide that they are perfect at some point and should be fixed at that point, you've just killed it. I mean, you've basically killed it and pinned it to a board and said, this is the only one. We as Christians need to be gardeners like Sam and tend the living growth. Now, the Reformation is an effect, among other things, of the printing press, but so is the Counter-Reformation. Both the Protestants and the Catholics get very fixed on publishing accurate texts after the printing press comes out. Right? We are now in the digital, we're post. I said Lewis did radio performances of Mere Christianity. Dorothy Sayers, one of my other favorite authors from that period, scripted a radio play, The Man Who Born to Be King. There's all of the movies and such. Christianity has shot out into the electronic media, and now here we are in the digital media. That's where we are. So instead of worrying about where it diverged and went wrong, we live in the reality of the. See, I am an ant. I'm tending to the trees, tending to the forest. We have to be a living tradition, and that's what matters most. So yeah, the synesthesia that was lost. It's like the Protestants, they diminish the value of the visual arts to a great degree, but then they end up focusing more, like Bach, right, on the musical arts. And hymn singing. The Protestants tended to, a lot of the best hymns are Methodist, right? So I see present Christianity is fractured into all of these different things, and maybe we can say the Ents have lost their Ent wives, and we need to get back together. Yeah, so Annie, I'm glad that helped. In Encyclopedia of Mythology, we're kind of working. That's the goal, right? And I realize with the Substack entries, I need to maybe be clearer. I don't know. I think and talk synesthetically, and it all goes into our poem. And then I need you all to be able to enjoy the unlocking of the poem. Here's the the images that we put in it, and here's how they shimmer out. Um, Rogue Wave. Was Homer completely lost to Western Christianity during the early Middle Ages? They had Virgil, but not Homer. So they know about Homer. They know, they obviously love Virgil. They love Virgil more than I think most modern classicists even appreciate, because they were using Latin as a living language throughout the Middle Ages, and they learned it with the classics. They learned reading Virgil. They learned reading Horace, Ovid. There's big interest in Ovid in the particularly in the 12th century. I think they don't have a full version of Homer. They sort of know the story and they have introductions to it, but you're right, they don't have as much access to it. That doesn't it's not for lack of interest in the classical stories though. They still learn in school throughout the Middle Ages the ancient mythologies. But I'd have to look it up exactly how what kind of I think they know about Homer, but they don't have the text. Um, right. I'm glad, Robert, thank you. It's like, so it's living into it. That's what we're trying to figure out, how to live into it. Casey, finding yourself in the story makes perfect sense. It's the same story going on for a millennium, and occasionally we can see it. Well, we're in the story now, right? That's what's I scholarship and being in the story are a tricky sort of pairing, right? Because, and that's how I got, layers of trouble with my professional self and my public self. But even within my professional self, one of the things have tried to do, I don't have that book with me, particularly with my second major book on medieval devotion, was say, what would it be like to pray like a medieval Christian? And I find it amusing that in Marrying the Art of Prayer, the main thing I did was change the pronouns, right? I have these little introductory sections to each of the chapters going, imagine you are doing such and such, and you are saying the office, and you think this to yourself. And then, a lot of the rest of it, I'm doing a kind of commentary exegesis show of what the medieval text actually said, because these are texts that people really haven't read in a very long time, and so they get confused when people pick pieces out of them and don't put them in the full context. But people in my field got confused because I said, well, I want you to imagine yourself into this experience, and I'll do it by way of my language. You, right? You imagine yourself saying these prayers. It's ironic because, for example, the many of the scholars who are in the Getty Lumen catalog are art historians, and they're famous for trying to set up exhibits where you find yourself experiencing the art, right? They'll have music piped in, or with the Lumen objects, they want them, lit so that you can see the glitter of the gold and so forth, and find yourself, experiencing these objects as if something, right? But the experience is different in academia from in, I think, what we're trying to do in Draco Alchemicus, or obviously what you do when you go to Mass, which is academia, in C.S. Lewis's terms, is standing outside the beam. I'll explain that in a second. And it's like, what do you do if you actually want to look along the beam to see the object of faith? Now, that was an image that Lewis used to try to describe his frustration like 80 years ago. It's like, you see it in That Hideous Strength, his frustration with the academic world, that he was I don't know whether I've ever told you guys on this, on the Mosaic Arc. I've used it a lot in my other interviews. So he called it a meditation in the tool shed, and he's in his tool shed, and he's standing with the doors closed, and there's a beam of sunlight coming down through a crack above the door. And he says, I could see the beam, and I could see dust motes floating in it and such. And it's like, there it was. There's the dark, and there's this beam of light coming into the darkness. And I could study the beam as a beam, right? But then Lewis says, but then when I stepped into the beam and looked not at it, but along it, through it, I could see all the way to the sun. I couldn't see the beam anymore, but I could see what it was showing. It's like the light that was hitting his eyes. This is very medieval meditation. They love this kind of problems, like the heavenly light, or the light, the physical light, and what is it relationship to the heavenly light. And Lewis says I could look along the beam and see by metaphorically by faith. Now, in academia, people like standing outside the beam and looking at it. And if you step in the beam and say, I'm looking along it with faith, you just look crazy. Right. So the inside outside problem, in anthropology, it's the emic and etic. And always forget which one's which in that. It's like whether you are describing the culture from within, as someone from within the culture would participate in it, or from outside. And of course, for anthropology, it's perfectly fine to have that interior vision from the perspective of, the people who you're doing an ethnography on, for everybody but Christians or Western Latin Catholic. I don't know. It's a problem. It's like to do that kind of sympathetic read from the inside, you're expected to step back out and describe all of the ways in which it's mistaken. I've taken issue with that because I actually believe the interior vision as well as the exterior vision. Okay, finding yourself inside the story. Rogue Wave, Casey, yes, the last day will be very interesting to see how the puzzle pieces fit. Okay, so I have this, like, I'm moderately old. I'm almost 60. I'll be 60 on February 12th, like when the dragon is next pointy. Whoops. Oh, I can show you our blue reveal there. And you think, like, what else am I going to be able to do in my scholarship? I may have as much as 30 more years, but God willing, God showing me what he wants me to be writing. Scholarship is very exhausting, and I certainly spent the last 30 years training up to the level where I can quote stuff off the top of my head right now and be terrifying. What am I going to do for the next decade or two of reading, and why should I be? And I realized one part of me is saying, I need to be reading all of this because I have all of this background to be able to process stuff, to be able to say to you all, read this, right? This is really good start place. I mean, unfortunately, there's always like, I'm going to tell you 18 more things to do too, but like start here, discard an image. I need to, because I need to be able to point people to things. So I need to be the dragon and pointing to things. But I also realize I have this, it's kind of like, if I need to know all of the stories so that I can check whether I got it right. In the long run, it's like, do we get a vision after hopefully we're in the light and with our Lord, whether we got the full story or not, or were there pieces still missing? Well, part of me is like, I know we're going to still have pieces missing, but the urge is to find the whole puzzle, and I want to put the whole puzzle together for sure. Titanic, Casey says, it's like the Titanic exhibits where you get a ticket at the beginning of the tour telling you what class you were in. It's supposed to really help you experience what the passengers experience. Right. I mean, this is all of the museum world. It does this constantly, right? It's like to get you to come to the exhibit, they want to promise you an experience, right? Experience the glory of this, or the terror. It's like they're competing with the movies, but they have the real material objects, which is cool. So instead of it just being an illusion on screen, if you do the museum exhibit, you get, it's like you're there. It's like it's pilgrimages of, it's like it's our pilgrimage of the relics, right? The real physical thing that touches the event. It's interesting for scholarship. Scholarship does, I mean, this in my academic world, this is a puzzle, right? Because it's relying on stuff that we know, and to like study it in a scholarly context, you need all these footnotes from all of the stanzas and images that we've used in putting the pieces together. But it's different from this. The scholarship is looking at it, not looking through it to see what it is that we want to show you. And I think that's it's a characteristic of our age, whether we're in the beam or looking at it, right? This inside outside problem. And I think people are worried about if you're too far in a beam, you won't be able to see all the stuff that's going on around you and you might miss out, right? So inside, outside. This could be a theory for why we're going nuts. You know, to make it okay, so you essentially become part of the exhibit yourself. Well, then, yes, then it's like you're watching yourself. I mean, we end up, it's like we're in these mirrors, these shimmering mirrors of participation. Rogue Wave. Do you think Charlemagne planned to be crowned by the Pope, or do you believe what Einhard wrote about the event? I think so. The Carolingians are intensely fascinating. Um, Charlemagne is very Trump-like, I think, in a lot of ways, right? It's like, to what degree was he influenced by his advisors? To what degree did he choose the right advisors? He'd been being taught by Alcuin, who was, you know, generations after Bede, who was, you know, fixed on Gregory, who was the Pope, who had sent the, you know, the missionaries to Canterbury to turn the English into Christians. And here's Alcuin teaching Charlemagne about how important Gregory was, right? I mean, the Carolingians, among other things, and the thing is, like, whether it was Charlemagne leading the project or whether it was his monastic advisors taking advantage of his interest in coordinating things. He was, you know, emperor king for a very long time, 768 to 814, right? So they have decades in which they have at least a single ruler, right? Before that and after that, they end up in a lot of trouble because Charlemagne has this one great lifetime that they're able to do the work that they are in doing things like regularizing the monastic institutions, regularizing their book copying. I've been studying a lot of this for this lecture I'm doing on arts and sciences. Things like regularizing their book layouts, which matters a lot because they need to be clear and readable. Regularizing their liturgy, which what we call Gregorian chant, see their Gregorianness is, they're very interested in that, is actually Franco-Gallic, right? It's the chant that the Carolingian church develops. It's not really Old Roman. It's a different tradition. They're able to do all of these things because they have Charlemagne as king. And despite the fact that Charlemagne, as Einhard tells, is basically on campaign every year, right? The army is very, very active constantly. It's not happening at so much within the empire. It's on the frontiers to Spain, to the Saxons, to the Avars and so forth. And of course, the Avar treasurer gives them money and so forth. I think, you know, the popes are already recognizing that they need protection, and to a certain extent they have needed protection against the emperors in Constantinople, which they remember when Belisarius tries to reconquer the peninsula under Justinian. What Charlemagne doesn't seem to have done, which is what plays out in the way in which he distributes his wealth and kingdom among his children, is think of the empire as indivisible, right? It's not divided because Louis the Pious is the only one left when Charlemagne dies, but he'd had, you know, arrangements to divide up the inheritance with other siblings, and then when Louis dies, his sons divide it all up, right? So what Charlemagne thought being emperor meant is a big question. It's a fancy title, and it's important for his image of himself as ruling, but exactly what kind of an administrative entity he thought the empire was supposed to be, you know, their scholarship, right? Okay. The daydreaming. We too often step out of the beam to seek understanding, which sometimes we get, but at a price. Well, so, you know, once you realize you can step out of the beam, and that's, interestingly, I think Christianity is partly the reason we know we can. Because this I was thinking about listening to Vox and James. I sorry if you guys just got to go watch James Dalrymple's videos. I did one like with him some time ago, right after he'd become Christian, and he wanted to talk to me about being Christian. He and Vox were talking about what it meant to be really a Christian, and Vox said something about, well, he'd been baptized when he was 10 growing up, but he wasn't really a Christian until he was 27. And that the sort of catch there is being really a Christian is a statement of belief, right? The creed, the symbol. So symbol means a variety of things. Symbol bringing together, right? I read a nice meditation on that recently. It's like um, uh, a symbol brings together. And what's the opposite of symbol? Somebody tell me in the chat. Uh, so the state Christianity is a statement of belief. So yes, it's hard to figure out how babies can have it. Um, so it always has that intellectual assent built in, saying I have faith. These seems to be intellectual activities or cognitive activities at least, or something other than simply being culturally part of it. Um, but because you can watch people saying they believe or not, I think we step in and out of it intellectually. I Yeah, so what's funny about doing the Mosaic Ark is I get to talk about whatever I want, right? And there's often things I can't talk about in my classes. But on the other hand, the Mosaic Ark isn't everything that I talk about in my classes on campus. One, because for the classes, I have to give people reading, and we're talking about the reading assignments and so forth. And also they take a kind of continuous commitment that I know some of you in the Mosaic Ark have, but it's tricky to like really develop up a full narrative understanding of how complicated all of these things are if I only get you once for 2 hours, right? So some feedback will be nice on what kinds of things you guys would like us to talk about, and I can certainly talk through some of these things historically, but recognize the reason I have all those syllabi. Like I've taught, I in my time at Chicago, I have taught new classes every year, right? Because I'm constantly adding things to my repertoire and also things that I need to read more about myself and so forth. And every single one of the questions that gets debated online in the internet, as if it can be like, solved by an easy tit for tat and no, their line. No, right? For example, like what's Christianity? Well, again, just because I was listening to it on the drive home from fencing last night. It came up, it's like, are you Pauline? Are you Christian? Are you this? Are you that? Well, for that matter, like, which of the gospel authors are you going to pick? Are you really Johannine? Or are you Matthewian? Are you Markian? Are you, oh, wait a minute. The gospel authors are writing after the fact too. Each of them is inventing their own version of who they thought Jesus was. This way lies peril if you're trying to do something that gets to the pure version of what it is that we're supposed to be believing. We live in time and we are historical, and Christ, the one thing I'm absolutely clear about is the incarnation defines time. And that's another of the reasons that the Lumen Getty exhibit is so interesting, because the astronomy is about calculating calendars above anything else, right? It's about marking our liturgical cycles in time. So, yeah, that's the daydreamer stepping in and out of the beam. Okay. Okay, so I've staggered everybody. Everybody's fallen asleep. All right, let me see what happened okay. Well, okay, so in the Dragon Common Room chat Fat, thank you. Yes, Fat has found the Getty, the Art and Science of Light, the Getty Museum. It's beautiful. I mean, I was obviously super excited about the exhibit anyway, but the catalog is outstanding. It's somewhat expensive, but it's beautiful. It's very, very beautiful. Beautiful photographs of the objects, excellent essays. They're all pretty short essays, so they're very easy to sort of dip into, but rich, right? It's like a box of the best chocolates you'll ever get. In fact, oh yes, so if you check out in the Dragon Common Room on Telegram, Fat is dropping in all of the links to the things that I've been talking about, which is very useful. Okay. All right, so I should show you the what I said. So here we have realizing that one of the things, like redefining everything so that I can do the encyclopedia version of what we've been up to and the mystical, magical mystery tour of things. We also now have a proper representation of ourselves as the Mosaic Ark. Thanks to Zé Nuno Fraga, our wonderful artist for Act 1. This is an image that is based on image from the Junius manuscript that Casey and I talked about back in June when we were talking about Pride, right? Showing the Ark, and very importantly, that this is the Ark understood properly in true Calvinist terms, as well as medieval terms, 11th century English medieval terms. There's Christ the Lord closing the door of the Ark, right? So that we are, insofar as we are our cruise ship, it's with Christ as our guide and protector, allowing the most important animal onto the ark is a corgi. And the inhabitants of our ark, which are Kiltz, who was our co-host with me for the first year and a half, Casey, and she and I are in the middle rank there, is the co-host now, and Mel, without whom you would not see anything framed as beautifully as it is, because she makes all of our clips, but she also made the intro and outro videos for us, right? So all important and beautiful video work Mel has done for us, because she does her own video editing for her snowboard sponsorship with motherboards. So if you ski, you need a motherboard from Love Your Motherboard. Okay. So by Silent Draco, yes, the beam question is something I'll think you figure out. We're going to generate yet more bibliography off of this. It's C.S. Lewis's Meditation in a Tool Shed, and I'll see if I can find it and drop it. I'll probably have to do a Substack on that now. I could do one Ask Me Anything Substack. One Ask Me Anything Mosaic Ark can end up with an entire year's worth of Substack topics. Rogue Wave, just like being part of a nation. Yes, you are born into it, and then later in life you can either embrace it or leave it. But even if you leave it, you're just considered an expat. So I think, yeah, we've done a lot of meditations on nation and history in the Mosaic Ark the last couple of years. With Kiltz, she brought the Australian perspective to the question. It's like Australia, although they speak English and have, allegedly a similar kind of history to the United States as a colony, they weren't, right? They were very, very different kind of colony, more like Georgia, expanded as a convicts, but also different subsets of the British Isles. I mean, strong Scots Irish and Irish settlement there, mixed in with, other peoples in different ways from the United States, and with a different political tradition in being attached to the kingdom and the empire. So, the question of nation, it gets reified and simplified as either racial, typically on the internet. It's interesting that that's the category that people tend to default to, or I think in realistic terms, in terms of who's talking to whom in what networks, language, right? It's like the Chinese internet is itself, blocked off from the West, and we're blocked off from them in different ways. But the linguistic divide is enormous. Whereas the Anglosphere talks to itself. So we're talking to England, and we're talking to Australia, and we're talking to New Zealand, and we're talking to Canada. But there's other empires still out there that we've just watched. Sorry, that was the funniest face I just made with my nose getting itchy. Watching the arguments that Elon Musk and X had with Brazil recently. The Portuguese world is another great network that those of us in the Anglosphere don't necessarily talk to that often. But when I got to do a talk a few years ago in Lisbon, I was suddenly aware of the fact that I'd stepped out of one world, which was the Anglo world, into this completely other empire, which was just as global, just as, both New World and Old World. I mean, Lisbon itself was, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Um, and I got to meet Zay on, basically on pilgrimage there in Portugal, because he's in Portugal. And it was like realizing, you talk about finding out you've been in a house that had completely other rooms and you never knew they were there. That's the world. What other sub empires there are. I suppose we're kind of moderately aware of maybe the French, the German. Okay, so I sort of bumped into this, talking about this several times, but David Blackburn did a wonderful book on Germany and the world, on Germany in this period from 1500 to now. Whereas the German experience was very, very different from the French and the English and the Spanish, because the Germany did not have the same kind of maritime empire, not being a maritime power. Has a brief period of empire in the late 19th, early 20th century, loses it for reasons that are very topical to many people's conversations. But the Germans themselves are in everybody else's empire constantly as scientists and mercenaries and immigrants and factory workers and so forth. So I noted this in my I'm an Ent post on Substack, that I'm both aware of my Scots-Irish heritage, thanks to my grandfather Fulton's digging around in our lineage, as well as some on my mother's side that people have done. But on both of my father and mother's side, I'm also German. But that immigration, as Blackburn shows in his Germany in the World book, is hidden from most people's self-understanding, particularly in the Anglosphere since the World Wars. So that's interesting. I think what we're learning is, I mean, one, as an academic, and an academic who was trained in the 80s and was therefore very aware of Benedict Anderson's book on imagined communities, nations are always imagined. They're always imaginary storytelling entities. And the 19th century was a period of great invention of nations. They're all invented in the 19th century. If you think of yourself as English or Anglo-Saxon or German or French or Italian, most of the imaginative work that went into giving yourself that story is the invention of medieval historians in the 19th century. I mean, Germany particularly, right? I also spent last winter reading Simon Winder's series of books on the German-speaking lands. There's no Germany prior to 1871, and that the Deutschland über alles that everybody gets excited about in the 20th century meant Germany over the different regions of what had been the Holy Roman Empire, right? Speaking of Charlemagne, right? It's Germany over being Bavarian or Franconian or Saxon or Hessian, or I run out of ones that I can name. Rhineland-Palatinate, right? Apparently some of my ancestors came from the Palatinate in the 19th century. So, our sense that there is such a thing as a real nation, no, there isn't. There's stories about how you all belong together. And if you think I can make a simple nation out of the ancestry that I just described to you, good luck with that. I'm a medieval historian, right? So nations like the church should be living traditions. And as a historian, I'm here to insist on that. Tolkien, I did some discussion in some of the Tolkien episodes on, I mean, language, right? What Tolkien said. Tolkien was very, very wise. I consider him way smarter than me. Nation is the product of history and language. And what I was just saying just now about, like, which worlds our conversations participate in, whether they are English speaking or French speaking or Arabic speaking or Hindu. It's like who you can talk to and who you tell stories with starts defining who you are. They're shared and real traditions, but they are much more mosaic-like than I think most people appreciate. Casey, is there a work other than the Bible that the people of the Middle Ages fought over, the interpretation that is, as strongly as they fought over the Bible's interpretation? Well, actually, they didn't fight that much in the Middle Ages over the Bible. That the Bible was the commentary tradition was a living tradition, so there's no fighting. There's some disturbance in the late 14th, early 15th century in England because of political rebels using an English translation of the Bible, but that's it. That's the Wycliffites, and that gets spun up in the night in the printing era in the 16th century is a completely different phenomenon from what it was in the 14th and 15th centuries. But I mean, what they're arguing about in the Middle Ages, like I'm not sure, Casey, which controversies you mean, because arguments are over liturgical practices, for example, between the Eastern Church and the Western Church over the use of fluffy or unfluffy bread, leavened or unleavened bread. They're over jurisdictional concerns, like the degree to which the Pope is able to adjudicate things like appointments of bishops. Again, the issue between the churches. They're over doctrinal interpretations of things like the Mass, which like the Cathars end up in a debate over transubstantiation, in effect. And they're the big debate famously between the East and the West over the Son in the Creed, which is not a scriptural text, right? So, in fact, the kinds of things that we think of as Bible debates happen in the 16th century in a completely different context from the debates that were happening in the Middle Ages. The medieval commentators are much. I mean, you could say, I mean, if they're fights over their arguments, there's arguments between Muslims and Christians. The Christians get translations of the Quran into Latin in the 12th century and start becoming aware of the doctrinal differences at the same time as they're scooping up and reading Arabic commentaries on Aristotle, right? So it's like they're debates, but they're actually moderately well informed about the differences that they're having to wrestle with. And then there's, of course, debates with the Jews, who the Christians, again, are asking for, advice on how to read the Hebrew. And then they find out that the Jews have different interpretations from what I mean, like in the 12th century, the Christians are asking the rabbis a lot about readings of the Old Testament. And then they find out that there's the whole other ritual tradition that goes with the Talmud, and they realize the conversation needs to be different yet again. But none of that happens at the same level as the post-printing press debates that Christians have now about the Bible. I hope that answers the question. So, okay, a rogue wave. I've been fascinated with the Basques, non-Aryan language speaking border peoples, and say semi-autonomous for thousands of years. I don't know much about the Basques. I mean, Rogue Wave, you've clearly been reading a lot of Charlemagne history and the Song of Roland, and the Basques are probably the ones that were attacking the rear guard of Charlemagne. I don't. I mean, the Basques show up in medieval stories with the pilgrimage to Compostela, which should be on everybody's mind. And I wish now I had a picture of her, because she's come up a couple times in my conversation today, of the anime Luce character. I think she's Luce, right? I mean, if they called her Lucia, it would have been simpler, because it's just the light, right? She's shown as a pilgrim, and she's holding her staff, and I think there's these sort of these like light bursts in her eyes. But to me, they look like the shells of the pilgrimage to Compostela. Western Christians would have known about the Basques because they had to travel through their territory from Germany, France, England, over the Pyrenees into Spain to get to Compostela on the Galician coast. And there's some stories about how they're wild and rude people or something like that. But the pilgrimage routes all went through that region. So that's basically all I can do. I can do that much off the top of my head. I haven't properly studied that subculture. This is okay. So what you'll find out is, again, a good deal of what we think of as the modern nations. If you draw it on a map, right, you'll find out they're all regionally different. I remember, again, I feel like I've said this before, but there's a Asterix comic where the story is Asterix and Obelix has to have to do this tour around Europe, getting all the regional delicacies. It France is not a single thing. It's all of the different regions. Germany is not a single place. It's all of the different regions. England is like more homogenized than I think some of the other places are. But even it is, East Anglia versus Wessex versus the Midlands versus Northumbria. I mean, to this day, they still remember those different regional differences. The United States actually is not that different, right? We are all of our different local traditions, and empire always wants to make us pretend that those aren't real. But our regional differences are powerful and strong. And St. Lucia with her pilgrim staff and her world council's rosary and her Compostela symbolism is trying to do something that's quite challenging, which is bringing together all of these different regions. Yeah. So, Casey, yes, I should have said debate instead of fight. Well, I mean, we're always projecting our versions of the fights onto the past, and always, right? Through the default one, look for pirates. Um, understand that much of what we think about the Middle Ages is a projection off of either the 18th century Enlightenment internal desire to throw off all the older institutions. There's the 16th century throwing off the English institutions. There's the 18th century France throwing off its institutions. There's the 19th century invention of the nations, and so pretending that they're somehow distinct from the Christian culture that they'd had for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's the 20th century. It's like onion-like. We'll do Shrek as like history. Onion layers of reasons that the story needs to be retold again. And one thing that at least the medieval centuries was they were sort of happy with all of the anachronisms and the piling on because they saw themselves still within the same story. I don't get me started on the Dark Ages. I mean, it was a truth of the fall of the empire, but it's not the way people use that phrase. Like back in the Dark Ages, nobody knew anything. It's like, okay, there were technological reasons that it was difficult, but they were throughout the Dark Ages of the early Middle Ages, like Charlemagne, very, very interested in preserving the old knowledge as well as they could. That they weren't trying to get rid of it. Exactly the opposite. So I think Saint Ignatius of Loyola was a Basque. He was from the north. I've looked at him when I teach Eurociv because we read his spiritual exercises as a counter to like Loyola and Luther are exactly contemporary. And here's Luther doing his, oh, I don't need any of this training and tradition. I'll, pray spontaneously. And Loyola saying, I'm 37 years old. I need Latin. I grew up a knight. I, gone on pilgrimage to Montserrat and, understand that I should be, in fact, in the church. And he studies Latin with the kids and then goes off to Paris to be trained properly. And that, I mean, it's like those people are, Luther and Loyola are completely contemporary in their response to the desire for both a more engaged, experiential sense of their faith and either no rules or more rules. I mean, the 16th century is a fascinating period. We are living, I mean, with the media transformations, we live through similar sorts of problems of everybody gets mad at each other and insults everyone for a decade, and then we have no culture left, and we have to figure out how to rebuild it, which is what we're doing now. So that's good. Okay. Let me see if Fats put up any more. Germany in the World by David Blackburn, also on the Draco Chemicus reading list. Yes. So if those of you who want to like fast forward upload all of the work that we've been doing in the Dragon Common Room, Fat did a onboarding document, which you go back to the web pages. I have put here, whoops. This is OBS. I have to remember that I have to engage with it. Okay, here's the Mosaic Ark. go to the study guides and the quick reference guide. Not sure it'll load from this. I think it won't load from this context. Okay, the quick reference guide is a PDF that Fat wrote, which summarizes a number of the things that we've been working on over the last several years. I'm going to pull it up and read some of it to you because it's excellent. So go to the study guide. Maybe it's the website itself that's slow. Why can't I can't move around on my own website right now. Okay, Mosaic Arc, study guides, quick reference guide. Okay, so what to know first. We posted this on the newsletter a few weeks ago too. This group is focused on teaching Christian poetry, art, history, mythology, theology, and symbolism from a Catholic and Orthodox perspective. We also analyze current events through these lenses. It's great when someone else can explain yourself better than you can. I'm terrible at it. I need I need marketing help. Okay, here's what you'll learn if you hang out here. You will learn poetry in its forms, especially iambic pentameter, the heartbeat of the English language. This is what we call learning to scan. Scanning means to read the meter or rhythm of poetry. Poetry is the heart and soul of our English heritage. This is true. We speak English. You need to learn to scan. You will learn the history of Catholicism and Orthodoxy and its peoples across the world, with particular focus on Great Britain, Australia, the Middle East, East Africa, and the United States. You will learn to apply lessons of history to the modern day. You will learn the significance of the veneration of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Catholic and Orthodox history and tradition. Yes, Hail Mary. How it influenced the development of Western civilization, and how faithful Catholic and Orthodox Christians approach the Savior, Jesus Christ, through his mother in both ancient and modern times. There's a lot of points. You will learn how empires have shaped the structures, the medium in which we live our lives, think our thoughts, and relate to others. How these structures exert control over our minds, how Satan and his servants have used these empires to dissolve the old structures of Christian life, and how determined Christians resist these forces and even thrive with the imperial currents of the fallen world. It's more about markets and media and art forms and hierarchy. All of that is what we've been up to in the Dragon Common Room. And one of the many things that I have put together, in addition to the syllabi that are on the Dragon Common Room website, on my academic homepage, are study guides on a link through the Dragon Common Room site. And these are, some of it's my academic homepage, the blog. Dragon's Keep is a reading list that I put together for our original working on the poetry. Behind the Scenes takes you to the reading list for Draco Chemicus. The Forge of Tolkien is my videos on unauthorized on Tolkien. And these bottom ones, Medieval Christian Mythology, Tolkien, and Marian Mariology, are blogs for courses that I taught at the University of Chicago, with comments by the students on the things that we were reading. So there's a lot of, and yes, and Fat has now found the Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, many different editions available. The symbols brought together, it was actually a post that I think I think one of the Substack or Kickstarter accounts put up. I can't remember who was saying. Okay. So, Rogue Wave. Yes, I've been reading the Song of Roland and other French romances of Charlemagne. Amorica, Brittany, and Galicia also interest me historically. Yes, the thing is this, so for Americans, we, have this wide scale, from far away take on studying European history, because, like we're all mutts. Mixtures of peoples that have come over and have, created whatever the United States is at the moment. Europeans studying their own history tend to do a lot of local history. Like medieval history in Germany, as it's studied now, tends to be a lot of local history studies, right? It's like they're knee deep in details and materials in a way that Historically, the people in the United States weren't, although thanks to all of the scanning projects that the European libraries have been up to, we can access a lot of the manuscripts now in digital form. And some of the work that I've been doing this last year has, involved looking at scans that are available in Florence of texts that I'm reading now that are available easily because they've been scanned by Google Books from the 17th century printed editions. It's like the internet world. I know it feels scary and frustrating and divisive. So was the 16th century with printing press. But it also suddenly made available all sorts of new information that it AI is not going to do it for us because AI is simply a fancy search engine. You're still going to have to do here's the pitch for why follow us on the Substack, right? You're still going to have to do all of the integrative work to put all of these pieces together, to find all the connections, to find the predictive moment when you suddenly realize it's all, shimmering together in this wonderful harmony of insight. And the AI can't do that for you. It will never do it. It doesn't, I mean, not even that, it's not a mind or something like that, but I don't think it has the, won't have the motivation for finding out the story, right? That's what we do. That's what we on the Mosaic Arc are here to practice with you doing. It's what I'm going to do little footnote entries to, in effect, on the Substack. It's what we are trying to synthesize in our work on the poem. It's what we hope to share with you in this new format that thanks to the internet, we are in this light world now. It's not I think it's not an accident that the little anime character one's a cartoon character, which has been given physical form if they've made little dolls out of her, right? But it is also a phenomenon of the internet as much as everything else that we've been talking about tonight is. So we're in this moment now, 2024, which involves us in this kind of media environment that's both physical and um light only, right? Digital. So that's what we're trying to participate in. Okay. Okay. Casey, exactly. AI does not have the capacity to care about any subject it searches or speaks about. I won't ask the right questions because it can't understand that concept. That's it, right? It's we ask the questions. I mean, there's this, the great scholastic, sort of debate world was questiones, right? They're asking difficult questions. They're the 4-year-olds of theology and this why, right? The entire 13th century is one big why, and that our longing to understand is clearly given to us as one of the gifts of our creator. It's like here we are, and the revelation of the creator is, and here I am, find me, right? Participate in this wonderful creature that I've made for you to study and imitate and see myself, see me reflected in, see you reflected in. It's like a lot of what we're doing in Draco Chemicus is playing off of what Lewis would have recognized, what Tolkien would have recognized as this discarded image of the microcosm, the macrocosm, the microcosm, the macrocosm of the whole, the macro order, macrocosm, the universe, the everything, right? Versus the microcosm of the human being, which is we are modeled on the whole. Like they love this kind of resonance between, say, the elements that go into making the whole of everything and the human body. The earth, air, fire, and water is there in your hormone humors, right? Or that we are somehow, proportioned in ways that reflect perfectly the proportions of the cosmos. That kind of meditation is what makes people medieval, I think, right? It's this, certainly in the intellectual and spiritual world, that you are constantly aware of the need and the desire to understand. The AI is aggregating our thoughts in a like lumpy search engine, we are the ones that are given the longing to participate in the work of our creator, the subcreation that Tolkien talks about. So that's we very much see the um I forgot where I was going. I can't get it. I've wandered about. I sailed off the edge of my own meditation here. Diabolic to rend apart. That was it. Yes, the symbolic versus diabolic. Thank you, Daydreamer. That was it, right? The diabolic versus the symbolic. So if we are not going to be diabolic, dividing, we are going to be symbolic, which is bringing everything together and enjoying the connectedness of things and recognizing, yes, the diabolic is the thing that always wants to divide us. I mean, it's so funny with Shia LaBeouf is that he will not divide us. It's like, and then she ends up, playing Padre Pio in the movie. I also enjoyed Shia in the fourth of the Indiana Jones as the son, right, who brings the parents together. He's symbolic, very symbolic. He wants to bring people together. So yes, it's the symbolic versus the diabolic, and we will bring together in the arc. Casey, your comments on taking part in creating helps me to understand why sloth is a deadly sin. Yes, I mean to fundamentally, you're refusing to play. You're refusing to take part in the joy of bringing, you know, beauty and insight to our living with each other. It's funny that Kamala Harris tried so hard, or her staff, who knows, poor woman, um, to like make joy their catchword, and it's like, wait a minute, that's mine. I say that I've said that on my homepage for ages. Like, why do I say the Middle Ages joy? And you can see that in everything that I've been trying to do all of these years with my, bring together my public self and my professional self, bring together the ways in which we study from the outside and the looking along the beam from the inside, bring together. I mean, certainly I you know on this day of All Saints, I'm deeply grateful for those of you who've come together with me in all of my different avatars, right? And the Dragon Common Room and on the Mosaic Arc and in our writing, to work together to make things that cannot exist on their own. We need to be monastically working in harmony with our different skills. And so I'm if this can be a celebration tonight, it's not a celebration of me, it's a celebration of you guys, right? It's a celebration of what can we make with our hobbit like. I mean, you might go back to my ints, right? The hobbits, you need 4 hobbits, you need 4 of us in the Mosaic Arc. We need, the fellowship to be able to create the things that we're bringing and making together. All right. I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping up there. Yes, okay. This is VA Boston had actually forwarded this from Thane Trombar, who's another of our Substack friends. Diabolic is derived from the root Greek diabalein, meaning to throw or rend apart. Dia symbolizing two, division or polarity, which is also the root of dialogue, the word exchanged between two speakers. So diabalein. Its opposite is symbolic, to throw together or unify. The symbol allows for things which are apparently divided to the external. So wait, the symbol allows for things. I think there's something missing here. Apparently divided to the external sense to be shown in their deeper, more fundamental unity. Right. I think this is medieval art and exegesis is constantly on this bringing together, bringing all of these things into showing their participation in the cosmos. And a lot of the art that it's hard to say whether it's art or something. Diagrams in medieval monastic training are very much about showing the sort of fullness of everything's connections. That's why I wanted a picture of us together in our arc, right? So it's like there's a conceptual unity there that really matters. So Thane continues. This is why the creed is only colloquially termed creed, because of its incipit phrase, credo, I believe, right? But properly titled the symbol, The gospel and everything in the higher realms of reality point towards and move towards unification, which symbolically shows fundamental unity without erasing expressive particularity. This is actually incredibly important for Christians, right? It's like we are together as Christians, but that here we are on All Saints, right? The saints are all different. And if you reading recommendation from my scholarly um, work for today, is the article, and most of these older ones are on my academia.edu site, so you can download them. I did a paper on Anselm and praying with the saints, right, and finding out that Anselm of Canterbury wrote a series of prayers to the saints. And I'm focused on Mary, so I'm like, why do you need other prayers? Like Christ and Mary, that's good for me. And he goes on, he writes in Mary Magdalene and Benedict and John the Evangelist, John the Baptist, Peter and Paul, and so forth. So why do you need so many different prayers? And realizing that each of the saints shows you a different relationship with God, right? It's like, how could we possibly see God in, the fullness of the divinity? The saints each have a relationship with God, and in Christian understanding, we're individuals, right? Each of us has our own relationship with God, and the wholeness that we come together in is the glory of the heavenly city. So the gospel is, moves towards unification, but without erasing particularity. It's very, very interesting that so much of what we do in our culture now is worrying about its identity and being erased. And identity seems to be the only way you can have it is if you're like homogenized with this other people with the identity. And yet we need to be all individuals. It's like, wait a minute, we actually have a model for that productively. As I hate that word, but it sounds like mechanization, right? It's very, well, whatever. We have a better model for that in the saints, having actual identity, but in unity. This is why the faith is fundamentally Catholic, which means universal, which is likewise composed of unus, one, and versus, turned or transformed. Unus versus. So entering truly into the symbolic is to move away from the diabolic, and that is a transformation or unification process that is the fundamental essence of reality. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. There's a lot of potential philosophical meditation there too from Platonism. I promise you, it's all on the reading lists, and they keep getting longer. The accomplishment of this transformation is the universalist mystery expressed by the gospel. Quote, a plan in the fullness of time to bring all things into one in Christ, both in heaven and on earth. Ephesians 1:10. That's okay. So that comment that I was reading from is Thane Trombauer's insight, and it's a diabolic opposite of the symbolic, and we're working on the diabolic. Rogue Wave. The saints are the flowers of God's great garden. Yes. Keep the int vision of the garden and all the flowers and all the trees, and every tree different because it's expressing itself, but all part of the forest. The saints are the flowers of God's garden. Rogue Wave says, when are you going to get Jonathan Pajot on the ark? I haven't asked him. You can ask him, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I think he has bigger issues than our little ark, but it would be fun. It would be a nice conversation. I mean, I went on his symbolic world a couple times, long time ago, right? And we've both been on pretty long journeys since then. It would be nice to have him on. Okay. So what should I end with? I have well, I realize I have there's lots of books here, conversations, stories. We could do a brief reading from we have the arc. We should highlight a little bit our other major book. Sorry. They're under my Trump hats. Which is of course Aurora Borealis, which is our children's book, and This one you can get. I can hold it up there right here. Um, all of these are available on through Amazon. We we need to sell more to make it productive for us to have our own like shipping outfit, which we don't yet. So you can just buy them on Amazon. Um, Here is, I think, here was our desire to say coming together from the characters of the Aurora Borealis. So there's some bears, and they go on a quest to find the light in the south. And when they finally find the light, they find that it is in fact a griffin who has a nest full of beautiful eggs that they each get a gift of. They all get a light-filled egg, but they when they come to see the griffin and find out who he is, they each have an insight. There's three bears: Ivan, Henry, and Spencer. And this is the insight that they come to. So the griffin is asking, "Can you tell who I am?" Ivan scratched his head, spyglass in hand. Then, stowing it, he scratched his head again. "It's such a task," he cried, "to comprehend such sights a simple bear could not envision. Concrete things I spy, but these are foreign. Such marvels could spring only from a griffin. And to divine a thing we cannot see requires some help for bears, if you ask me." Henry, in a hushed, admiring manner, spoke eloquently of the artful scene. "It's beautiful, a veritable signer that's full of tangible and mystic things. It's like a map that leads the viewer higher, each element a step towards that being, an omnipresent light that incarnates through albatross and griffin collocates." Spencer cried out, "I know I must repent. When you flew Yuan up your mount, I glared." Yuan's the panda. "I was angry, not knowing your intent, but now I know that you were right to dare. Forgive me, please, hear my contrite lament. I wish to be the good grain, not the tare. Controlling others marks an evil will, while holy love's light guards our Yggdrasil." Which of the bears got him right? Which of the bears, looking at the griffin, was able to tell truthfully who he was? There's the clue. Those of you who know the symbol IHS will understand what we tried to show here, which was the coming together, the symboling of the bears in their different traditions. One of them's Ivan's more Orthodox, Henry's more Catholic, and Spencer's more Protestant. He's a little bit belligerent. And that we were trying to show that they actually all had parts of the larger tradition that the light was showing them, and that the challenge for the bears in working together was to understand how that could actually work for them. Yes, Daydreamer saying, "Yes, plug all the books. Aurora Borealis on Amazon." Yeah, so all of our books, you can find them. You can go to the Dragon Common Room website and go look at the shop, and you could look at they're all listed there with links to where you can buy them. You can get them as ebooks, you can get them as hardcovers, and there's a new one coming out of Draco Alchemicus soon, so watch this space. We'll have lots more books. Okay. Well, I think that this has been a lovely tea time. We write in our dragon poetry, right? Happens because tea time, because I set up originally Dragon Common Room is a common room, and you have tea in the common room, right? So our poetry writing we call tea time, but this has been a very nice chance to just hang out with you all, and hopefully give some clue to why there's so much backstory constantly, because like we're always trying to catch up with our Lord's backstory, and that to say we're very happy to have you joining us on the Mosaic Arc, and hopefully sharing some of our adventures with us as we learn how to think through that discarded image, knowing that there is the image in which we were made by our Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, all right, so you now know how to find us. You now know what I'm doing, hopefully, with the Substacks, and understand that the Mosaic Arc is your home base for these kinds of tours. So happy All Saints. Yes. Yeah, so and Daydreamer says sign up for the pre-launch list when the prof makes it. So if you subscribe to the Substack or to the newsletter, we will be in touch and you will know exactly when we're going to start showing you that our artist is doing such amazing work, but she's putting like polishing layers on each of the images, and I don't want to launch anything until she's got them fine-tuned. Anyway, sign up to the Substack, to the newsletter, join us on the live streams each week, and thank you for joining us.